Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Avatar: The Last Airbender Commander deck techs. The Avatar set has a huge number of legendary creatures, so I wanted to showcase some of my favorite commander options from among them. I'm releasing new Avatar commander decks every Thursday through mid-January when the Lorwyn set drops, in addition to my usual Monday commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Avatar: The Last Airbender commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today, our commander is Katara the Fearless, the sole remaining waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe. At the start of the series, she and her brother Sokka discover Aang and his iceberg and get the whole story rolling. And while both siblings are important members of Team Avatar, it's Katara who gives the team its cohesion. But it would be as easy to pigeonhole Katara as a Team Mom archetypal character as it would be incorrect to do so. Because, for example, her progressive mastery of waterbending comes primarily because it's something she wants to do, not just a way to teach the Avatar. In fact, from the beginning of the series, Katara is the character who both introduces the audience to the concept of bending and establishes that it's not seen as magical or strange in this setting. Katara demonstrates that strength doesn't come from personal potential, even when you're the Avatar, but rather it's something we derive from our connections with others, a lesson she both teaches and is forced to learn herself. I really like Katara, and I'm excited to show you what I assembled for her. But before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're cool and why I chose to build a deck all around them. So whatever they ask of me, I put toward our game plan. That's 30 cards. That is what our deck tries to do at the table and how it tries to win. 30 more cards go toward 3 categories of support for that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, just to keep things clear if they need to be clear. Sometimes I'll run more, sometimes I run none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so that I can cast my spells and keep playing the game. So, let's go over our commander. Katara the Fearless is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally for Bant mana, which is a green, a white, and a blue. She says, if a triggered ability of an ally you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So she's Panharmonicon for allies, essentially. Katara's card text is simple, flexible, and powerful, just like Katara herself. It recalls Iroh's description of the element of water. Water has limitless flexibility. It can flow by the tiniest pebble or slowly lap at the toughest boulders to dissolve them. The people of the water tribes are capable of adapting to many things. They have a sense of community and love that holds them together through anything. This typifies one of the things that I like best about Katara. If something involves her friends, she's always game. In Book 3, Aang poses as a student in a Fire Nation school, and when he's instructed to bring in his parents for a conference, Sokka puts on a ridiculous beard and introduces himself as Wang Fire, and Katara as his wife, Sapphire. Katara doesn't even shoot him a look, just rolling with the fact that her name is Sapphire Fire. In Book 2, Katara takes Toph out for a girls' day, and when some jerks make fun of Toph, Katara joins right in putting them in their place, but also finds a way to comfort Toph and to compliment both her self-assuredness and her appearance. The latter of these is something that we imagine couldn't matter less to Toph, but she takes it to heart, because she knows what we know. Katara honors her friends' virtues, even when they can't, and her loyalty is without question. When Zuko joins the team, Katara was the last to accept him because she'd been the first to trust him. After they connected in the caves beneath Ba Sing Se, holding out this way wasn't hurt pride or petty vindictiveness on her part, but rather an expression of her integrity. Katara believes in interdependence, and when Zuko betrayed Katara and her friends to Azula, his actions repudiated her values. It's the same as the so-called paradox of tolerance. She wants people to trust each other, so when he showed he wasn't willing to be worthy of trusting, she withdrew the good faith she'd extended. It was only later when Zuko helped her find the Fire Nation officer who killed her mother, thereby demonstrating that he was finally willing to put the needs of an ally first, without anything personal in it for himself, that she chose to forgive him. Faith, trust, interdependence, loyalty, integrity, these are Katara's strengths. She may be the most powerful waterbending master of her generation, who defeated the firebending prodigy Azula while Sozin's comet hung in the sky. But Katara's true power comes from her character. That's why her card's ability is mostly about other creatures, helping them reach greater heights, because that's what true friendship does. In a show with a protagonist who believes in peaceful resolutions and spiritual purity, Katara is still the moral center of the group, the one who hears every discussion about fate and destiny and ambition and honor and grounds them in what truly matters most: people. There's a reason that every other major character's mightiest moments either end with them defeated and alone, Ozai, Azula, Zhao, Longfang, Hama, or with them adding their strength to Katara's. She is complex and nuanced, but she offers herself to those she calls family unreservedly and ingenuously, the bright reflection of clear waves over fathomless depth. Her own surety makes her as certain of her friends as they are of her, the first drop of rain that heralds the deluge. She is unwavering among her tribe, unshakable amid her family, unbowed and unbroken and unassailable in the company of the ones who love her, and she will never leave their sides. She is fearless and Peerful, and that she believes Aang can save the world is enough to convince me that he will. You'll enjoy this deck if you like synergistic Typal decks that go off explosively when the commander hits the field, or if you like a game plan that flows easily around your opponent's aggressions and teaches them how hard it is to stand up to the whole squad. So as usual, this Moxfield list that we're going over today is going to be in the video's description. At the bottom of this list, you will find a considering section, a bunch of cards that I ultimately decided not to put into the deck. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you want to go in a different direction or have a different focus than I chose, it's a good place to start if you want to build your own Katara the Fearless deck. So we're going to start with the core of what Katara's card is all about, her allies. We've got 31 cards that are allies. Technically we've got 30, but you'll see what we get to at the end. We're going to start with the Earth King's Lieutenant. This is a 1/1 human soldier ally with trample for a green and a white. It says, when this creature enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other ally you control, and whenever another ally you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So both of these are triggered abilities, so Katara will double them both. Earth King's Lieutenant comes in, and we get to put 2 counters on each other ally we control, which includes Katara herself, because she is a human warrior ally. And whenever we have another ally enter, this is going to trigger twice, and we'll put 2 counters on the Earth King's Lieutenant. So it's just going to get into a bigger and bigger trampler for us, and also comes in and makes all of our friends 2 counters bigger. So pretty good. Great Divide Guide is really excellent in this deck. 1 and a green for a 2/3 human scout ally that says each land and ally you control has tap to add 1 mana of any color. So not only does this perfectly fix our mana, because it means all of our lands tap for whatever mana we need, it also means we can tap our allies for mana. And since we're mostly casting allies, if we're talking about creatures, it sort of means we have Convoke, which is the classic Selesnya, everyone works together to use the power of friendship and family to cast our spells. So Great Divide Guide is here to totally fix our mana and accelerate us in big ways. Invasion Reinforcements is next. This is 1 and a white for a 1/1 human warrior ally with flash, so we can cast this on an opponent's turn or at instant speed, maybe during combat. And when it enters, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token. So not only do we make 2 of them, since this is a triggered ability thanks to Katara, but this is 2 mana for 2 creatures or 3 creatures, assuming our commander's in play, and that's pretty great value, especially since they all trigger anything that cares about our allies entering, like, for example, Earth King Lieutenant's last ability. So yeah, this is not heroic reinforcements. Is it heroic reinforcements? No, it's resolute reinforcements from Dominaria United, but as a warrior ally and makes allies. So a good card made even better in this deck. Next we have an older ally. This is originally from Zendikar. Kazandu Blademaster is a 1/1 human soldier ally for double white. So double white for a 1/1 is pretty good, being that it has First Strike and Vigilance, but whenever this creature or another ally you control enters, you may put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So even without Katara out, this triggers on its own entry. So it's a 2/2 creature, since it's going to put a counter on itself, for 2 with First Strike and Vigilance. That's pretty great. But with Katara out, this will trigger twice when it enters, so it's a 3/3 for 2 with First Strike and Vigilance. That's a great Watch Wolf. And it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger for us. First Strike makes it a good attacker and a good blocker, and we might as well do both because it has Vigilance. Next is Masked Vandal. Masked Vandal is a 1/3 shapeshifter for 1 and a green, but it has Changeling. Now, I know it doesn't say ally here, But Changeling means this card is every creature type. It doesn't say this creature is every creature type. This card is. Because Changeling functions in every zone. Masked Vandal is an ally as well as every other creature type, no matter what zone it's in. So if we look at the top 3 cards of our library and we're looking for an ally, we can select Masked Vandal because it is an ally. It just doesn't have it in the type line. But it has an ability that functions in all zones that makes it an ally, and that's what we care about. It also says, when it enters, we may exile a creature card from our graveyard, and if we do, we exile an artifact or an enchantment that an opponent controls. So that's pretty solid as a way to, like, supernaturalize something. But because this is an ally, and this is a triggered ability, we get to do this twice. Now, it doesn't mean we exile a creature and we can exile 2 artifacts or enchantments. We have to do a creature and then 1, and then another creature from our graveyard and another in order to make that work. But being able to have the flexibility of doing it twice, assuming we have 2 creature cards in our graveyard, it's pretty nice for a 2-drop. Next is Ondu Cleric. Ondu Cleric is 1 and a white for a 1/1 core cleric ally that says whenever this creature or another ally you control enters, you may gain life equal to the number of allies you control. So pretty sweet. With Katara in play, if Katara is our only creature in play and we play Ondu Cleric, it will enter and will gain a total of 4 life. Because this will trigger the first time, we'll gain life equal to the number of allies, which is 2 for Katara and the Cleric. And then we'll do it again, so total of 4 life just because we played a 2-drop. And then we'll keep getting more and more and more life as we get more and more and more allies. That triggers on allies that enter, not just cast, not just the ones we cast. So Evasion Reinforcements is going to help us out a lot with that as well. Next up is South Pole Voyager. This is a cool card. 1 and a white for a 2/2 Human Scout ally that says whenever this creature or another ally you control enters, you gain 1 life, and if it's the second time this ability has resolved this turn, draw a card. So when this first comes in, assuming we don't have Katara in play, it will gain us a life. And then the next ally we have come in that turn will gain us another life and we'll draw a card. And any further allies are just going to gain us life. Because we don't draw a card every other time, it's just the second time each turn that the ability is resolved. However, if Katara's in play, that's going to be the first time the Voyager comes in, because the Voyager will enter, this creature enters, the ability is going to trigger twice thanks to Katara, so we'll gain a life for the first resolution, and the second resolution will gain us a life and draw us a card. So it's just a 2-drop that gives us 2 life, a card, and a 2/2 on the ground. That's pretty great. I'm trying to think of something that's comparable to like a Helpful Hunter or a Spirited Companion, but it's not gaining us life. Yeah, pretty good. Next up is United Front. This is not a creature card. For X and double white, we have a sorcery that makes X 1/1 white ally creature tokens, but also puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So this is not something we're going to get to double trigger on because it itself does not have any triggers, but it can sure cause different triggers on our allies. For example, Earth King's Lieutenant, whenever another ally we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So if we have one ally come in and Katara's in play, it'll get 2 counters. But if we cast United Front for X equals 5, we're going to have 5 allies come in, each of which will trigger Earth King's Lieutenant, and those triggers will be doubled by Katara, so we'll end up putting 10 counters on the Lieutenant. And then, even before we've done that, we've already put 1 counter on the Lieutenant just from United Front, putting a counter on all of our creatures. So pretty nice that it lets us pay X after the double white and make a bunch of 2/2s, since all of these tokens are going to get a counter as well. Next up is Unsettled Mariner from Modern Horizons. This is another Changeling card, so it is an ally. We don't have to worry about it. For a white and a blue, we get a 2/2 Shapeshifter, Changeling, so ally, that says whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. So this is essentially Ward, except it's not Ward because it works on us as well, and Ward is only something on permanents. So Unsettled Mariner makes it so it has this ability. It's the thing that, it's not granting Ward, it's the thing that's triggering. And because of Katara, and the fact that this is an ally, it means anytime someone targets us or one of our permanents, they're going to have to pay 1 generic mana twice, thanks to the doubling of this trigger by Katara, so therefore 2 generic mana, or we get to counter whatever it is that they've either cast or whatever ability they've got going on. So Unsettled Mariner is a really nice protective ability, or a protective piece for us in this deck. Next is Water Tribe Rallier. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier ally, and it says Rallier, but it looks like Ralliers, but we won't question it. With just 1 ability, Waterbend 5. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with power 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Waterbend is, you can spend 5 generic mana, but you can also tap artifacts and or creatures 1 for 1 to pay for that mana. So pretty good. This is an activated ability. Does that Katara let us double that? No. Katara only lets us double triggered abilities. So Water Tribe Rallier is very nice in this deck, and it is an ally, and so it can trigger our other cards, like I keep mentioning, Unsettled Mariner. If someone tries to target the Water Tribe Rallier, Masked Vandal, we can exile it from our graveyard, but most importantly, Earth King's Lieutenant, of the things that we've seen so far, or South Pole Voyager. Yeah, Earth King's Lieutenant is the best example. This is an ally, so it will trigger this card, but it itself does not, on its own, have a triggered ability that we can double. However, we've got a lot of creatures in this deck, and we're going quite wide, so being able to Waterbend, tapping maybe just creatures, not even mana sources for it, pretty nice. And we've got a lot of these creatures that have power 3 or less. We can look into that, but I think it's a pretty good number. Yeah. So Water Tribe Rallier as a good way for us to essentially draw ourselves a card. It's not unlikely we're going to be able to do so. Aang Swift Savior. I tried to put in this deck one of the characters from, one instance of the characters from Team Avatar for each of those characters. It didn't exactly work out, but we did get to have some, and one of them is Aang Swift Savior. If you like this card, take a look at my channel. A couple of weeks ago, I released an Aang Swift Savior deck, and actually I released 2 of them, because one of them is a flavor deck, and one of them is a more, playable deck that can do a little bit better at the table. Check out that video. I'll link it in the video's description. So, Aang Swift Savior is 1 a white and a blue for a 2/3 flyer with flash. He's a human avatar ally, of course. He's the avatar. Flash means, of course, we can play him on an opponent's turn, or at instant speed on our turn, whatever we like. He flies, and when he enters, we airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. Airbend means we exile it, and while it's exiled, while still obeying timing restrictions, its owner can cast it for 2 generic mana rather than its mana cost. So, pretty nice that we can hit a spell with this, meaning we can get something that's on the stack still. We just flash Aang in before whatever it is has resolved, and we airbend that spell, which means it leaves the stack, it's in exile, they can recast it, its owner can recast it, and only for 2 mana, but maybe they don't have that 2 mana this turn. You never know. And since Aang is an ally, if Katara's in play when we cast him, we can airbend 2 things. Maybe there's 2 spells on the stack we want to hit. Maybe we want to hit a spell and then whatever creature that's the scariest on the board we want to get. Or maybe we want to airbend our own stuff so we can rebuy them and trigger things again. That seems pretty good. We'll be able to see more of that later on as we go. But Aang has one more ability, which is Waterbend 8 to transform Aang. Waterbend works the same way we talked about before, and if we transform Aang, Aang becomes Aang and Law, Ocean's Fury, which is a 5/5 legendary Avatar Spirit ally with reach and trample, and whenever it attacks, we put a 1/1 counter on each tapped creature we control. So, tapped creature, usually we think of it as like these creatures are attacking as well. But because to transform Aang into Aang and Law, we waterbend, it could be that all of our creatures are tapped because we used them to waterbend our this card right here. So yeah, being able to tap our creatures down, we have several different ways to make that happen with our waterbending, with our just combat in general, and we can put more counters on them thanks to Aang's backside. Pretty good. Next is Earth Kingdom Jailer. 2 and a white for a 3/3 human soldier ally that says when this creature enters, exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater until this creature leaves the battlefield. Oftentimes you see this effect and it's mana value 3 or less because it's just something small, like Oh, the Throne of Eldraine card that gets something 2 or less. That's a good O-ring. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Earth Kingdom Jailer gets rid of something big, and because this is a triggered ability on an ally, if our commander's in play, we can get 2 big things and just leave the Jailer back, not have them attack, so they're not being risked, in the sense of our opponent blocks and then the Jailer dies and they get something back. They're going to have to spend a removal spell on this Jailer, which is a 1-for-1, and they get their thing back. Alright, next up is Realm Walker. It's another one of these changelings. 2 and a green for a 2/3 shapeshifter with changeling, and as it enters, we choose a creature type. We will choose Ally in this deck. It says you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. So that does include cards with changeling that are creature spells, of course. So this gives us a little bit of card advantage. We can play off the top of our library. It's like having another card in our hand. We can't cast every one of those cards, but it's the same as saying we've only got 5 mana and I've got an 8-drop. Can't cast that either. But sometimes we can. And there's plenty of cards, like I mentioned, at least 30 cards in this deck that are allies that we're going to be able to see on top of our library and maybe cast. So yeah, Realm Walker is nice for us in that way. Next, we've got to have Sokka. Sokka, Lateral Strategist, is a 2/4 legendary human warrior ally for 1 and double Azorius hybrid mana. So we can either spend 1 and double white, 1 and double blue, or 1 a white and a blue, whatever we want to do to cast Sokka. Sokka has Vigilance, and whenever Sokka and at least one other creature attack, we draw a card. So Sokka rewards us for attacking with a bunch of creatures. They don't have to be attacking the same opponent or planeswalker that our opponent controls. As long as we have Sokka attacking and at least one other creature, doesn't matter where they're going, we will draw a card right then. Next is Tajuru Archer. This is 2 and a green for a 1/2 elf archer ally that says whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, we can have the archer deal damage to target creature with flying equal to the number of allies we control. So we're doubling that trigger. So even if we only have Katara in play, we play the archer, we're going to have it do damage to a flyer equal to the number of allies we have, which is 2, so that's 2 damage, and then 2 more damage from the second trigger. So that's 4 damage on its own, which is just a straight up flame slash on a flyer. Not everything our opponents have flies, that's true. But some of the scariest things they have flies. Dragons fly, angels fly, a lot of demons fly, vampires fly. Tajuru Archer may not do much for us in this deck other than just be an extra ally, but we can sure and most likely keep the skies clear with it. Next is Hakoda, Selfless Commander. This is Katara and Sokka's father. 3 and a white for a 3/5 legendary human warrior ally with Vigilance that, again, lets us look at the top card of our library at any time. We can cast ally spells from the top of our library, just like Realm Walker, or we can sacrifice Hakoda and give all of our creatures +0/+5 and indestructible until end of turn. Sad to lose Hakoda, but he protects everyone, much the way his daughter does. Next is the Kyoshi Warrior Exemplars. 3 and a green for a 4/3 human warrior ally that says whenever it attacks, if we control 8 or more lands, creatures we control get +2/+2 until end of turn. This is a triggered ability, which means if we control 8 or more lands, this ability will trigger twice, and all of our creatures, including the Kyoshi Warrior Exemplars, will get +4/+4 total. So pretty nice. Good way for everyone to get pumped up that isn't just counters. We're also running Retreat to Emeria. This is not a creature. It's an enchantment. For 3 and a white, we have an enchantment with landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we either make a 1/1 white core ally creature token, or all of our creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. Most of the time, we're going to want to get these ally tokens, so we can just have more and more and more allies, but sometimes we want to pump everything up. There is a quote-unquote upgrade to this card, which is Feldar Retreat. It's the same cost, but its triggers either give you a 2/2 Cat Beast, or all of your creatures get a 1/1 counter, or rather get +1/+1 and Vigilance until end of turn. So that's definitely better than Retreat to Emeria, except this makes allies, and allies trigger our other allies in this deck. So it is worth noting, though, that this landfall trigger will not be doubled by Katara, the same way that Hakoda doesn't have any triggered abilities on him, so it's not going to be doubled by Katara, but helps out our allies, and much like these tokens, other cards are helped by them. Next up is Talus Paladin. 3 and a white for a 2/3 human knight ally. Ooh, it's a knight. Whenever this creature or another ally you control enters, you may have allies you control gain lifelink until end of turn, and then put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So there is a version of this creature in the considering section that costs 2 and a white and is a 3/2 that just says this. It doesn't get the counter on it. I felt like this was a better play. Giving everything lifelink is pretty good. Making this more protected is even better, because doubling up your lifelink trigger is the same thing as having a single lifelink trigger. But being able to put 2 counters on this whenever we have it or another ally come in is pretty good. So this is, with Katara in play, a 4 mana 4/5 that gives everything lifelink until end of turn when it comes in, and just keeps getting bigger and bigger and giving lifelink again and again when any of our allies enter. Next is the Blue Spirit, which is Zuko. 3 and a blue for a 2/4 legendary human rogue ally that says you may cast the first creature spell you cast each turn as though it had flash, and whenever a non-token creature you control enters during combat, draw a card. So this means we can cast our spells, our allies, our creature spells that is, on our opponent's turns, as long as we only do 1 per turn, because the first creature spell we cast each turn it can be the only creature spell we cast each turn. And if we want to cast it during our opponent's combats, or during our own combat, because we're allowed to do that as our first creature spell, it'll draw a card. Now, it's not participating in that combat, but it's fine. And if we want to have it participate as a blocker, we can do that after our opponent attacks us. We can flash something in, it'll come in, draw us a card, and then we can block with it if we like. But it's also worth mentioning, if we want to play creature spells on our opponent's turns at flash speed, and we want to draw cards when we do, we don't have to be the one getting attacked. It can be opponent A attacking opponent B, and we say, oh, by the way, during your combat, I'm going to play this creature and draw a card off of it. Y'all have fun with that combat. So the Blue Spirit gives us great repeatable card advantage and a way to sneak in creatures that a lot of the times our opponents will forget about and will suddenly have a big blocker or a whole bunch of triggers due to that creature coming in, or both. Next is the Earth King. I really like this card. 3 and a green for a 2/2 legendary human noble ally that enters and makes a 4/4 green bear creature token. This is obviously Bosco, but it does not make a legendary token. So when it enters, if Katara's in play, we're going to get 2 4/4 bears, which is 4 mana for 10 power. It's pretty good. And whenever one or more creatures you control with power 4 or greater attack, Rampant Growth, which is search your library for basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We're just getting to do it for every creature with power 4 or greater that is attacking. So the Earth King gives us ramp, specifically with a rampant growth effect, and values us having big creatures, which we have a bunch of big creatures, but also a bunch of ways to pump up our creatures, so not hard for us to get an awful lot of our basic lands out of the library and onto the battlefield. Even though they're tapped, we're going to be able to use them next turn. Plus, assuming Katara's in play, this will trigger twice. So if we're attacking with both of the 4/4 bears that the Earth King made when he entered, thanks to Katara, we're going to get this trigger and get 2 lands, and then the copy of the trigger as well, and get 2 more lands. So attacking with 2 of these 4/4s gets us 4 lands, that's a lot of land. What is that normally, like a 6 mana value for us? Pretty great. Next is Hero of Gomafada. 4 and a white for a 4/3 human knight ally with Rally. Whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, creatures we control gain indestructible until end of turn. So yeah, this comes in and we attack because all of our creatures are indestructible. Then any other ally comes in and our creatures become indestructible. What if we need to protect ourselves on our opponent's turn? Well, we have the Hero of Gomafada in play, or at least we have the Blue Spirit in play. And we play the hero on an opponent's turn when they're targeting us with some kind of board, with like a removal spell that destroys, or a fight spell, or a board wipe that doesn't exile. Flash in the Hero of Gomafada because it's the first thing we cast that turn, and all of our creatures get indestructible. Then on the next turn, someone else tries to do it as well. Well, we use the Blue Spirit to flash in a different creature that is an ally, triggering the hero, making all of our creatures indestructible again. It's 5 mana for a 4/3, but it does a lot of work for us. Next up is another Katara. This is Katara Water Tribe's Hope. 2 a white and double blue for a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally with Vigilance. and it says when Katara enters, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token. So if we have our commander in play, this Katara will enter, and we'll make 2 of these tokens. Now I want to make mention, if you are new to Magic, this says when Katara enters. It doesn't mean whenever any card named Katara or any card depicting the character of Katara enters. Magic cards, when they say the name of the card, they're referring only to that card. So when Katara Water Tribe's Hope enters, we make a 1/1 ally creature token. If we were to have this card in play and then we play our commander, it won't make a token because it's not this Katara, just so you know. However, if we have our commander in play and this Katara enters, this ability will trigger twice and we'll get 2 tokens. And this Katara says Waterbend X, and creatures you control have base power and toughness total XX. Until end of turn, X can't be 0. Not total, just XX. So that means we tap as much as we can, hopefully not creatures, and we Waterbend 10, let's say, and all of our creatures are now base power and toughness 10/10. This is not a bonus, it overwrites their power and toughness until the end of turn. So we attack with all of our 10/10s, we maybe get some counters on them as well, we make them indestructible, whatever it may take, and we slam in and either our opponents die or they lose a bunch of creatures in the process, which seems pretty good. Master Piandao is next. For 4 and a white, we have a 4/4 legendary human warrior ally. This is Sokka's sword play master, his instructor. Master Piandao is a 4/4 with first strike that says whenever he attacks, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, we can reveal an ally, equipment, or lesson card from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. This is a triggered ability. So whenever we attack with Master Piandao while Katara's in play, we're going to get to do this twice and essentially draw 2 cards probably, because we have, it says 27 allies, but we've already seen 3 changelings, so that's at least 30 allies in the deck. We've got 1 lesson, that's true, and we've got 2 equipment. So that's about a third of our deck that we're able to find a hit from, and we get to look at the top 4. So pretty likely every time we're going to be able to get at least 1 new card into hand every time this triggers, and it will double trigger thanks to Katara. Next up is Seascape Aerialist. 4 and a blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Wizard ally that says whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, we can have our allies gain flying until end of turn. This might just kill our opponents. We can, use Katara Water Tribe's Hope to waterbend our creatures into something really huge. We can even waterbend with the Seascape Aerialist the turn it comes in, because we're not tapping it to activate an ability printed on it with the tap symbol, we're tapping it to Katara's ability. So making all of our things fly, making all of our things big, swinging in, that might be just the end for one of our opponents, or maybe more, depending on how big we've made everything. But in any case, having allies land and everything becomes able to fly, that's pretty great for us. Next is Tajuru Warcaller. 3 and double green for a 2/1 Elf Warrior ally with Rally. Whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, creatures we control get +2/+2 until end of turn. This is pretty similar to our Kyoshi Warrior exemplars, but it doesn't require us to have 8 or more lands. It's just, did you have this enter or another ally enter? Was it just even, a 1/1 ally token? Well, the Warcaller says everything gets +2/+2. Oh, our commander's in play? Everything gets +4/+4. Which means everything is definitely triggering the Earth King. We've got so much going on with this. This is a 5-mana 2/1 that's 100% worth running. Speaking of a 5-mana 2-power creature, this is Turn Tipper Ranger. 3 and double green for a 2/2 Elf Scout Ranger ally. It doesn't say Ranger here because Rangers didn't used to be a type in Magic until Adventures in the Forgotten Realms was printed. Also, this is Wayne Reynolds' art, as you can definitely tell from his style. It's so cool. Anyway, whenever this creature or another ally we control enters, we can create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, and if we do, we put a 1/1 counter on the Ranger. So it looks like this is 2 triggers, but it's not, because this is an if, not a when. So this is all 1 trigger, and it will happen twice thanks to Katara, but the way this will go is, this enters, we can make a 2/2 wolf and put a counter on the Ranger, and then we can make another 2/2 wolf and put another counter on the Ranger. It's not that we make a wolf and put 2 counters on the Ranger, and then another wolf and 2 more counters. We only get an amount of counters equal to the amount of wolves we make, And for each ally that enters, including this one, when Katara is in play, that's going to be 2 wolves and therefore 2 counters, just so you know. Also, perfect flavor text for the themes of this deck. Next, from the Avatar Scene Box, Tea Time of the Jasmine Dragon. This is Katara, or Aang and Katara, a 5/5 legendary human avatar ally for 3 and Bant, 3 a green and a white and a blue. And it says whenever Aang and Katara enter or attack, I guess, because they're doing, it's 2 creatures, so plurals. Whenever it enters or attacks, this card creates X 1/1 white ally creature tokens, where X is the number of tapped artifacts and or creatures you control. So it really cares about not just attacking, but water bending. It wants us to tap our artifacts and our creatures, and it makes a whole bunch of little ally friends, which it's going to do a lot for us. Also, what beautiful art. Love this card. Next is Appa, Loyal Sky Bison. This is 4 and double white for a 4/4 legendary bison ally with flying, and whenever Appa enters or attacks, we choose to either give one of our creatures flying until end of turn, or airbend another target non-land permanent we control. Now it has to be something we control. So this is, like I mentioned before, a way for us to use airbending to rebuy our enters triggers. We can't use Appa to airbend itself because it says another, but we can use Appa. We get this trigger twice, and because we're choosing it as part of the trigger, we can choose to make something fly and airbend something else, airbend 2 things, or make 2 things fly. So Appa is helping us out when Appa enters or when Appa attacks, rather, and. So yeah, doubling up from Katara, pretty good for Appa here. We're going to skip this one, and we're going to look at this other Appa. This is from the other scene box, the Day of Black Sun, I think it's called. For 5 and double white, we get a 6/6 legendary bison ally with flying and vigilance, and it says whenever Appa or another ally we control enters, creatures we control get +1/+1 and gain flying and vigilance until end of turn. So a pretty big effect on a 6/6 flying vigilant creature for 7. Lots going on with this version of Appa, but I should mention, again, this one says whenever Appa enters, and this one says whenever Appa enters or attacks. Both cards are only referring to themselves, not to the other, if you have both of them in play at the same time. Finally, let's look at Titan of Lityara. Titan of Lityara is not an ally and is not a shapeshifter with Changeling. So this is why we have 31 cards in this section. It is sort of an honorary ally, because it's a 6/6 illusion for 4 and double blue rather. And as it enters, we choose a creature type. And this creature is the chosen type in addition to its other types. So these 2 abilities mean the Titan of Lityara, if we are looking at a card on top of our library and saying, is this an ally? So that maybe we can cast it with Hakoda. Titan of Lityara is not an ally because it only gets the ability to choose a creature type, which of course we will choose ally, once it has entered the battlefield. In any other zone before we've chosen that, it is just an illusion. So an illusory ally, so yeah. However, it helps our allies a lot, because whenever it enters or attacks, we can draw a card for each other creature we control that shares a creature type with it. And if we do, we just discard 1 card. So this is not a bunch of individual triggers where we have to draw and discard for each one. If Titan of Lityara is coming in and we control 3 allies, it will enter, and then there are 3 allies that will share the card type with Titan of Lityara, which will have gotten the ally type, which means we draw 3 and then discard 1. But if our commander's in play, we will draw 3 and discard 1, then draw 3 more and discard 1 more, because this whole trigger doubles. So this is pretty nice in that it gets us a bunch of cards in hand in all likelihood. Even if we only had our commander in play, and when this comes in, we get to draw and discard twice, which doesn't give us card advantage really, but it gives us good card selection in the form of looting. But in all likelihood, we're going to get this 6-mana creature into play after we have at least a few allies in play. Maybe we'll have an awful lot of them, and so we can just churn through our deck and get a whole bunch of cards in hand. We don't have to worry about discarding them all because we just keep the 7 best ones. So yeah, even though this isn't an ally until it hits the battlefield, or until it's going to the battlefield, it gives us an awful lot, and so it's our honorary ally for the deck. So that covers our allies section. As part of the rest of our game plan, we're going to look at these Typal cards. These are cards that aren't necessarily allies. Some of them are, like these ones. And Haru is an ally, and we didn't cover him, huh? So he goes in the allies section. Sorry about that, everyone. But we also have cards in this section that care about our allies. Conjurer's Mantle being one of them. For 1 and a white, we get an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 and vigilance. That's pretty okay. But also, whenever the equipped creature attacks, we look at the top 6 cards of our library and we can reveal a card that shares a creature type with the attacking creature, the equipped creature, from among those 6 and put it into our hand, then put the rest in the bottom of our library in a random order. So this is a pretty great way for us to say, you know, we attack with Katara, or we attack with Appa, or Hakoda, whatever it may be. We look at the top 6 cards of our library, we are going to almost certainly going to find an ally in there, and we get to just put that in our hand, in addition to Conjurer's Mantle having been just 1 to equip to give +1/+1 and vigilance. Now it is worth noting, Conjurer's Mantle is what is triggering. It is not giving the equipped creature this trigger, which means this trigger will not be doubled by our commander. So don't look at the top 6, put 1 in your hand, and then do it again, because the Conjurer's Mantle is not an ally, it is an equipment. If it was granting this ability, it would say that. It would say the equipped creature gains when this creature attacks, look at the top, etc. So yeah, just to note, this doesn't double trigger thanks to Katara, but because it digs 6 deep, that's pretty great. Pretty sweet for a total of 3 mana to give something +1/+1 vigilance and essentially draw a relevant card every time it attacks. Yeah, seems good. Earth King's Lieutenant, of course, puts counters on our allies and puts counters on itself when our allies enter. Great Divide Guide gives all of our lands and allies the ability to tap for mana. Haru, Hidden Talent, which we could have talked about in the previous section, but I didn't have it tagged right, sorry about that, is 1 and a green for a 1/1 legendary human peasant ally that says whenever another ally we control enters, we Earthbend 1. Earthbend means one of our lands becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that is still a land, and it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever that land dies or is exiled, we bring it back to the battlefield tapped. So we're totally fine with using it to attack or block, because we'll be able to get it back no matter what happens to it, if it gets exiled or destroyed or otherwise dies in combat. We just get it back tapped. But we can still tap it for mana if we want to. It's just nice to be able to make it a creature if we also need that. And it's whenever another ally we control enters. So it doesn't trigger on Haru entering, since it says another, but all of our allies let us Earthbend 1. So we can keep Earthbending the same land and putting more and more counters on it and making it pretty big. Now that land itself is not an ally, it's a land, doesn't have a creature type, but we're able to make something pretty big or a bunch of extra things as blockers or bonus attackers. And if we have an ability that says creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, it will affect those lands that have become creatures. It just won't, they won't be affected by something that says allies you control gain whatever. So that's Haru. We've seen the Blade Master. Blade Master, it's Typal in that it cares about allies entering, or itself, of course. Ondu Cleric cares about allies entering. Southpole Voyager cares about allies entering. Allies at Last is 2 and a green for an instant with affinity for allies, meaning it costs 1 less for each ally we control. Now, that can't make it free. It only costs 1 generic mana less. So it can go down to only costing a green, and in this deck it's likely to do so. So for probably a single green, up to 2 target creatures we control each deal damage equal to their power to target creature an opponent controls. So this is a 3 mana spell that we might only be paying 1 for to have 2 of our creatures bite another creature. That's incredibly strong. And it features the moment where Katara and Zuko bust into a Fire Nation ship, or a Fire Nation outpost, I believe, looking for the Southern Raiders leader. Descendant's Path is next. This is a great reprint. 2 and a green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, and if you don't cast it, put it on the bottom of your library. So this is not letting us keep cards on the top of our library, because if we don't cast them, they go on the bottom, but we don't have to pay for them when we cast them, which is pretty great. So we have an awful lot of creatures in the deck that are allies. So yeah, as long as our creature on top shares a type with something we control, we get to put it in play. Now, if Descendant's Path triggers, and we don't have any creatures in play, we do reveal the top card of our library, and we just put it on the bottom of our library, because we don't have any creatures in play, so whatever we reveal on top won't share a creature type with something we control. So we're going to do this no matter what creatures we have, and it may be that we don't get to cast it for free, but often enough, we're going to get a free creature out of this before we even draw our card for the turn. Pretty sweet, especially since we have 27 cards in this deck that are allies. I was just looking to see if we had any extra illusions so we could get the Titan of Lityara out. Which I guess we do, in all honesty, because we have we have at least 3 shapeshifters, which are every type. So if Descendant's Path reveals Titan of Lityara on top of our library, it is not an ally, but it is an illusion. And if we have one of our changelings in play, they are also illusions, so we'd be able to cast the Titan for free. Yeah, it works. It's intentional. Realm Walker, of course, lets us look at the top card of our library at any time and cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top. Of course, our type that we're going to choose is allies. Tajuru Archer lets us do damage based on the number of allies we have to flying creatures whenever it or another ally enters. Hakoda lets us cast allies from the top. Sokka's Charge, also from the Day of Black Sun scene box, is 3 and a white for an enchantment that says during our turn, allies we control have double strike and lifelink. Double strike and lifelink is, I mean, that's probably going to win the game for us. You know, being able to attack with a whole bunch of creatures, win with their first strike damage, continue to do damage if we didn't already kill off the blockers with regular damage, gain life both times. Yeah, Sokka's Charge is really great for us. We've seen Talos Paladin, how it or other allies enter, and it gets counters, and all of our allies get lifelink. White Lotus Tile is next. For 4 generic mana, we get an artifact that enters tapped, but we can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that share a creature type in common. So, in this deck, we might be tapping the White Lotus Tile for 30 mana. We can cast whatever we need with this. This is great ramp, although it comes in tapped and it costs 4 mana. So using this makes it so all of our card draw spells are going to be really great for us, because we're probably going to be able to cast them. But it does say mana of any one color, so we want to make sure we choose the right color based on whatever colors of mana we have available to us in the rest of our mana base, and the cards we have in hand. We don't want to just add a whole bunch of white mana and then look down and realize we needed a lot of green. We've seen the hero of Gomafada has Rally for Indestructible for our creatures. Master Piandao lets us look at the top 4 and find an ally, equipment, or lesson. Reflections of Lityara is 4 and a blue for an enchantment that says as it enters, we choose a creature type, so we'll choose ally. And whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell. So this is, we don't even have to let the creature or the ally spell enter the battlefield. It just, once it's on the stack, when you cast it, make a copy of it. The copy will resolve and make a permanent, which is to make a token, that is. And then we'll get the original into play. So both of those will trigger any triggers that they may have and be doubled by Katara if there are ones that would be doubled by Katara. Reflections of the Lityara is a do-nothing enchantment that's going to do an awful lot for us, assuming we're able to cast some allies afterwards. Seascape Aerialist lets our allies fly. Tajuru Warcaller makes our allies bigger. Turn Timber Ranger makes itself bigger, but also gives us some wolves. Vanquisher's Banner is 5 generic mana for an artifact that, again, as it enters, we choose a creature type. Whenever we cast a creature spell of the chosen type, we draw a card, and all of those creatures get +1/+1. So none of this is going to get doubled by our commander, but just drawing an extra card every time we cast an ally, making our allies +1/+1, that's pretty great. It's worth it for 5 mana. We've seen our Titan lets us draw a bunch of cards, albeit having to discard one after we do, every time we have an ally enter the battlefield, or rather, after the Titan enters or attacks. Appa lets us give +1/+1 flying and vigilance to all of our allies when it or another ally enters. And finally, we have Kindred Summons. Kindred Summons Kindred Summons is 5 and double green for an instant that says we choose a creature type. Of course, we'll choose ally. We reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal X creature cards of the chosen type, where X is the number of creatures we control of that type. And we put those cards on the battlefield and shuffle the rest into our library. That's crazy. It is 7 mana, don't get me wrong. 7 mana spells should be big and impactful. But saying, okay, at instant speed on an opponent's turn after they attack us, we're going to count the number of creatures we have that are allies, then pay 7 mana and get that many ally creature cards from our library into play directly, that's insane. That's an enormous amount of mana, but a much more enormous amount of value. So yeah, Kindred Summons is one of our biggest, splashiest plays in this deck, and it's a lot of fun. Probably the game is over after the next turn or two. So that covers our Typal section. We're going to go over the cards that supplement our game plan. We've got a bunch of supplemental categories, but first, we want to talk about these support categories. We want to make sure we eat our vegetables, starting with card advantage. This is card advantage, which of course I've just tagged as draw, as I often do in these decks. It doesn't necessarily mean all of these cards draw us cards, just that they give us access to another card or another extra permanent. So we've seen Conjurer's Mantle. When the equipped creature attacks, we get a look at the top 6 and put a creature that shares a type with the equipped creature into our hand. Probably that's putting a card in our hand. Disorder in the Court is really cool. X, a white and a blue, for an instant that says exile X target creatures, then investigate X times. Investigate means make a clue, which is an artifact with pay 2 and sack it to draw a card. So we're getting, exiling 3 creatures if X is 3, and then making 3 clues. And then we return the exiled cards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So let's say we wanted to do this to our opponent's creatures. Our opponent has 3 blockers, so we cast Disorder in the Court for 5, a white and a blue, and X equals 3. We exile their blockers, we make 3 clues, we attack, because we're not worried about them blocking since we've exiled all their blockers, and they get their blockers back at the next end step, and those blockers are tapped. So if our opponent is not the next opponent in turn order, like if we've done this to the opponent on our right, then the other 2 opponents at the table can also attack that opponent on the right, because while they have their creatures back, those creatures came back tapped. Plus we have a few clues to be able to do some things with them. However, we can also do this to our own creatures to protect them. For example, let's say one of our opponents is attacking us with 3 creatures that don't trample. We block with 3 of our creatures, and then we cast Disorder in the Court. We exile our creatures, assuming they're not tokens, that is, make 3 clues, and then the creatures our opponents were attacking with are still blocked, so since they don't have trample, we don't take any damage. And then our opponent goes to their end step, we'll get our creatures back, albeit tapped, and they'll get any kind of triggers they may have once they come back in, since they came back. So this is another one of our rebuy cards, letting us get the triggered abilities and value from our creatures entering a second time. Plus, we get a bunch of clues for it. So yeah, lots of cool things we can do with this. We can even use this politically, because it doesn't have to be an opponent's creatures or our creatures, either of which are involved in a combat with us. It could be opponent A attacking opponent B, and we can say, look, I can save you from opponent A's creatures as long as you're willing to hit them on the crackback. And they'll say, well, but they've got vigilance for their creatures. And we'll say, we'll take care of it. And if they make the agreement with us, we use Disorder in the Court to exile their attacking creatures. We get some clues. Those attackers will come back, but they'll come back tapped. And then they'll pass to opponent B, and opponent B can swing back. And that's our deal. And maybe we say, hey, and just don't bother me for the next turn or 2 as well. A lot of the times, saving someone or helping them get in, if they want to be the aggressive attacker and we want to remove blockers, that's also pretty good. Disorder in the Court has a lot of good value to it, and no matter whose creatures we're dealing with, we're going to get some clues out of it, which will get us some card advantage. Next, we have Herd Heirloom. This is 1 and a green for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, but only for mana we can spend on creature spells. But we have a lot of creature spells. So this is a mana rock for us, an artifact that taps for mana that we can spend to cast our spells. Although, like I said, only creature spells for this one. However, Herd Heirloom also says we can tap it, and until end of turn, target creature we control with power 4 or greater gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So pretty sweet as a way to get some evasion, trampling over when our opponent didn't expect it. We can only do it on one of our ferocious creatures, something pretty big, and we get card draw off of it. And if we have Sokka's Charge in play, then that's double strike and trample, which is pretty sweet, and we're drawing 2 cards, assuming we get to do the combat damage to the opponent with both of the first strike and regular damage. So yeah, Herd Heirloom is flexible for us in that it gives us acceleration and advantage and evasion for something that is a little bit big. But we don't have to do this before combat. We can wait until after blocks. We can wait until after attacks and whatever triggers we have from attacking. So maybe our creatures get pumped up to power 4. As long as it's power 4 when we activate this, the Herd Heirloom will work. So, South Pole Voyager, of course. It draws us a card if its ability resolves at least twice in the turn, because the second time it resolves, we draw a card off of it. Water Tribe Rallier lets us look at the top 4 and find a creature with power 3 or less and put it in our hand. Probably will be able to do that. Descendant's Path lets us cast a creature for free, assuming we have a creature that shares a type with it in play already when this triggers. Realm Walker gives us access to the top of our library and we can cast cards from there. Sokka lets us draw a card whenever Sokka attacks and isn't alone. Next we have Spirit Water Revival. 1 in double blue for a sorcery with an additional cost that we may waterbend 6. We don't have to do this additional cost, but if we want, we can waterbend 6 as well. Spirit Water Revival without waterbending lets us draw 2 cards, and then we exile it. But if we did waterbend, if the additional cost was paid, instead of drawing 2, we shuffle our graveyard into our library, draw 7 cards, and for the rest of the game, we have no maximum hand size. Either way, when Spirit Water Revival resolves, we do exile it, but this effect, a lot of people think of this as a wheel effect, but it isn't, because we're not shuffling our graveyard and hand into our library. We're just shuffling our graveyard into our library and then drawing 7. If we already had 6 cards in hand, we don't lose them. So Spirit Water Revival is going to draw us 7 cards if we pay 3 and waterbend 6, no matter what. Pretty sweet. So lots and lots of cards, or it's just a divination, which is fine too. Hakoda, like Realm Walker, gives us access to the top card of our library. We can cast ally spells from there. Pretty good. The Blue Spirit lets us draw cards if we have our non-token creatures enter during combat, and we can do that every turn with the first creature will be cast as long as we're willing to cast it during combat at flash speed, which the Blue Spirit lets us do. Master Piandao, whenever he attacks, we get to look at the top 4, reveal an ally lesson or equipment, and put it in our hand. And we get to do that twice, of course, I should mention again, if Katara is in play. Reflections of Lityara doesn't give us an extra card, but it sure does give us a copy of whatever ally spell we just cast. So that's another card, essentially. Vanquisher's Banner does give us another card whenever we cast an ally. Titan of Lityara lets us draw a bunch of cards when it attacks or enters, based on the number of allies we already have, although we do have to discard one. And Kindred Summons, like I mentioned before, lets us find all the allies we want, basically. If we've got 8 allies in play, it gets 8 allies from our library and puts them into play. So yeah, lots of different ways of getting advantage in this deck. So that covers that section. Next, we're going to talk about acceleration, which again, I've just shorthanded as ramp. So Soul Ring comes first, and it's an auto-include. For a single generic mana, it's an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. So it costs 1, taps for 2, pays for itself. It's extremely powerful. Put it in your deck. Similarly, Arcane Signet costs 2. It's an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So this taps for white or blue or green, and it's 2 mana for 1 rather than 1 mana for 2 like the Soul Ring. But because it fixes our mana so perfectly, it comes in untapped and only costs 2, that's a great rock. That's what we want. Next is Farseek. This is 1 and a green for a sorcery that says search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it in the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this is the rampant growth for our deck. It lets us find a plains or an island, because we're not running any swamps or mountains. But we have dual lands that are also forests. So we can find something that's a plains and a forest. It's going to come in tapped, but then the next turn, when it untaps, we can tap for white or green. Or we find an island in a forest and it taps for blue or green. That sort of deal. Farseek is very nice in these kinds of decks, especially with 3 colors in our commander's color identity. Speaking of that, Felwar Stone is a 2-mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color that in a land an opponent controls could produce. So this is an untapped 2-mana rock that makes mana for us. Now, it may be the case that all of our opponents are running black and red and nothing else, which means Felwar Stone is a 2-mana rock that comes in untapped and taps for mana we can spend on generic mana costs, like the generic mana costs in a spell that also requires one of our colors, or generic mana costs in an ability, or something like water bending. We're going to be able to use this mana somehow, even if it's not super useful to us. But the fact that we have the fact that we have 3 colors of mana in our deck means Felwar Stone is pretty likely going to produce at least 1 or 2 of them. It might produce all 3 of our colors, and if so, it's an arcane signet. Even if not, a 2-mana rock that produces 2 of our colors, not terrible, especially since it comes in untapped. Great Divide Guide, of course, lets all of our allies tap for mana and fixes our mana for all of our lands. And it's also worth mentioning, it says each land and ally, not each land and each other ally, so the Divide Guide also taps for mana for us. Herd Heirloom lets us tap for mana of any color, albeit only for creature spells, but we've got 32 creatures in our deck. Nature's Lore is sort of the opposite of Farseek. For 1 and a green, we get a sorcery that lets us search our library for a forest, put it in the battlefield, and then shuffle. But what's notable about this is, it does not say put that card on the battlefield tapped the way that Farseek does. So Nature's Lore lets us find maybe a basic forest, comes in untapped, and we can use that mana right away. So Nature's Lore sort of gives us a rebate on its ability, on its cost rather. However, we can, again, find dual-typed lands that are at least a forest and a plains, or a forest and an island, put those on the battlefield, and if they don't say it comes in tapped, or they say it comes in untapped if, which we'll see something like Canopy Vista, that helps us out. We get an immediate dual land that we're able to use. So yeah, Nature's Lore, there's a reason that it's $3 and Farseek is 60 cents. But Nature's Lore very powerful, as is Farseek in this deck. Next, we're running Shared Roots, which is just rampant growth, but it's a lesson. So it helps us in a couple of ways, like Master Piandao cares about it, and it's from the Avatar set, so it's thematic. 1 and a green for sorcery, and it lets you rampant growth. Search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield, tapped and shuffle. This, as opposed to Farseek and Nature's Lore, can only find a basic land, and it definitely comes in tapped. But can't hurt. For 2 mana, we get another mana source into play, and it's a lesson, like I mentioned, so that helps us a bit. Bender's Waterskin is next. This is maybe one of my favorite manoliths of all time. A manolith is a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. But it's thematic to our deck, since we're running a Katara deck, and it says untap this artifact during each other player's untap step. So this is bonus mana for us that we get every turn. We get to use this on our turn, and then it's untapped during our opponent's turns. Do we have some instants in this deck that we can use? Do we have ways to cast things at flash speed using the Blue Spirit? Bender's Waterskin gives us more mana than it seems like. We just can't use it all on the same turn. That's pretty good. The Earth King, as we've seen before, lets us rampant growth for each creature with power 4 or greater that attacks, or do that twice if Katara is in play. And the White Lotus tile, even though it enters tapped and costs 4 mana, lets us tap for X mana of any one color, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that share a creature type. So it's going to be a lot. That is our acceleration section. Let's talk about interaction, which again I just sort of shorthand as removal. So we start with Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. These cards, with one difference, are the same thing. They're both instants that cost 1 mana, they both exile a target creature, and they both give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives the creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Swords to Plowshares, obviously more powerful, but both are very good, and both are very efficient removal. So we're, of course, going to run both. Next, we have Airbender Ascension. 1 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we airbend up to 1 target creature. So we've talked about how that can be used as removal, so that's why it's in this section. And whenever a creature we control enters, it doesn't have to be an ally, just any creature. When it enters, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. That means even if we have an ally enter, It is not triggering, Airbender Ascension is. So this is not going to double trigger thanks to Katara. And at the beginning of your end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, exile up to 1 target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. This is called flickering or blinking, either way you want to call it. Airbender Ascension lets us remove something and then rebuy an effect every end step, as long as we've had 4 creatures enter or more since this came into play. It might have entered because we airbent one of our things, replayed it to get that value again, got another quest counter on it, and then as long as before our end step happens, we've got 4 counters on it, we get to flicker something. It's going to lose whatever enchantments are attached to it, it's going to lose whatever counters it has on it, but it will re-enter and get whatever triggers it has again. We can even hit Katara with this if we want to. She doesn't have anything that triggers on her own, but maybe we have other cards that care about our allies entering. So when she enters, those other triggers are going to happen twice since she's in play to see them enter. So yeah, Airbender Ascension is really a rebuy card in this deck, but it also gives us the ability to remove something as well. Masked Vandal, of course. When it enters, we get to exile a creature from our graveyard, a creature card that is, and therefore exile an artifact or an enchantment an opponent controls. And if we've got Katara in play, we can do this twice, maybe. Aang comes in and airbends up to 1 target creature or spell, other target creature or spell. So similar reason as the Airbender Ascension. Allies at Last is a double bite spell, pretty good. Earth Kingdom Jailer lets us exile artifact, creature, or enchantment, mana value 3 or greater than an opponent controls, or twice if Katara's in play. I like Emergency Eject as my most flexible removal, because for 2 and a white, it's an instant that lets us destroy target non-land permanent. It can't hit lands, but it can hit everything else that's in play. And its controller creates a Lander token. A Lander token is a Wayfarer's Bauble. It's an artifact with pay 2 generic, tap and sack it to search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield, tap and shuffle. So this is us letting an opponent rampant growth, but it costs them a permanent and they have to pay for the rampant growth. So it's pretty nice. The Archer, Tajuro Archer, of course, has a rally ability that lets us shoot flyers. And we have Touch the Spirit Realm. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we exile up to 1 target artifact or creature until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So it's our Oblivion Ring or our Banishing Light for the deck. However, it has Channel for 1 and a white. So while this is in our hand, we can pay 1 and a white and discard it to exile target artifact or creature and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. This is what I call a slow flicker. It goes away until the next end step, in which point it comes back. We can use this to rebuy our own things. We can use this to temporarily get rid of an opponent's things. Maybe we need to just clear the way, but we only have 2 mana, so we can do it this way. Yeah, Touch the Spirit Realm is great in terms of flexibility in that. Last in this part of the video at least, we have Wraths. These are the 2 Wraths we're running. Aetherize is 3 and a blue, for an instant that says return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So it's not killing any creatures, except for the tokens, which are not being destroyed, it's true, but they are going away forever. We use this to protect ourselves. We can use this, technically, to protect another opponent if we want to make a deal. We can say, hey, look, you're being attacked by one of my other opponents. I can stop this attack, but what are you going to give me for it? But really, it's in here in case one of our opponents says, I don't like what you're doing with all those allies. I swing at you with my thousands of elves or whatever, or my goblins. And we could say, okay, we cast Aetherize in response to their attack, or at least before they do damage to us, and we bounce all of their creatures back to their hand. Seems pretty good. We could use this on our own, technically. If we really wanted to rebuy all of our stuff, all we have to do is attack with them, and then, either let that attack shake out, or before combat damage, we could bounce all of our stuff. It's a possibility. A little expensive to do so if we're planning to rebuy, but yeah, Aetherize has got a lot of flexibility for us. And we have Avatar's Wrath. 2 and double white for a sorcery that says choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all other creatures. So all of our creatures, all of our opponent's creatures, everything that's a token, everything that's not a token, whatever it may be, we choose 1 creature, whether it's ours or not, it probably will be. It's probably one of our more expensive ones, like one of our Appas. And then everything else gets airbent. And then, until our next turn, our opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, and we exile Avatar's Wrath. So this means all of the things that we airbent can't be recast until our next turn. And since this is a sorcery, we're casting this on our turn, so there's going to be one turn cycle where no one gets to cast any spells except from their hands, except for other than us. So we can hopefully cast this and then start replaying our creatures, and whichever creature we targeted with the Avatar's Wrath is going to stay in play and hopefully be the creature that gives us the most value for our other creatures getting replayed. So yeah, this is a really solid Wrath, I think, that doesn't mean anyone loses their stuff permanently, except for tokens, of course, but gives us a lot of advantages in our deck. So that covers our support sections. Let's go into the supplemental sections we have here. Starting with one card, it's our synergy card. This is a creature that is not an ally and does not become an ally. It's Ironwill Forger from Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander. It's a 3/3 Orc Artificer for 3 and a white with a Lieutenant ability. At the beginning of combat on our turn, if we control our commander, target non-legendary creature we control gains Myriad until end of turn. So Myriad means whenever that creature attacks, opponent A, let's say that creature's attacking opponent A, we will make a tapped and attacking token copy of that creature for opponent B and another one for opponent C. So we take this creature with Myriad and essentially we attack everyone with it, just in the form of token copies that will be exiled at the end of combat. But those copies do enter the battlefield and do exist until they are either destroyed or get exiled. So if we have something that triggers when it enters, if we have something that triggers when these copies enter, we're using this Ironwill Forger to get all of those triggers. So we can't make a legendary creature have Myriad, and we have plenty of legendary creatures in this deck, but something like, what's a good example? We could throw out our Seascape Aerialist, that's pretty good, or Tajiro Warcaller. We make some Myriad copies of it with Katara in play, and each copy comes in and adds +4/+4 to all of our creatures. So we're getting +8/+8 rather on all of our creatures. No, we're not, because they see each other enter. So we're getting +12/+12 since we've got 3 Warcallers, 2 of which are just entered. Yeah. So the original will see the 2 copies enter, and it will give us +2/+2, and then that'll be doubled for Katara. Each of those others will see themselves and the other enter, so also we'll give +2/+2 twice, so a total of +12/+12. Pretty nice with Ironwill Forger giving us all these synergy abilities, thanks to Myriad. So we've talked a couple of times about rebuying in this deck. We're going to look at all the cards that let us do that. Airbender's Ascension lets us airbend one creature, which could be one of ours, so we can cast it again and get its triggers again. Disorder in the Court gives us a slow flicker. So if it's our creatures, we're going to be able to rebuy their abilities. The same is true for Touch the Spirit Realm and its channel ability, letting us do that slow flicker. Aang lets us do another one of these airbends that we talked about. Avatar's Wrath lets us airbend everything except for one creature, which is a great rebuy. And Appa Loyal Sky Bison lets us airbend another target non-land permanent we control, so it specifically lets us rebuy something. But we also have Lae'zel's Acrobatics from Baldur's Gate. 3 and a white for an instant that says exile all non-token creatures we control. And then roll a d20. If we roll a 1 to a 9, we return those creatures to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, so a slow flicker on all of our non-token creatures, so we don't lose our tokens. But if we roll a 10 to a 20, we return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control, then exile them again, and return them to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So what this means is we either slow flicker them, or we regular flicker them and then slow flicker them immediately. So we'll get all their triggers once, and then at the end step we'll get them again. Or we'll just get them at the end step once. So for 4 mana, we get to do an awful lot more triggers, and Katara hopefully is there to double them all every time. And even if we don't care about all the trigger doubling, we can still use this to protect our creatures. We let our opponents block with some non-tramplers, we block with our creatures before damage, we cast Lae'zel's Acrobatics, and all of our creatures go away and either come back at the end step or come back immediately, then go away again and come back at the end step. So there we go. That covers our rebuy section. Let's talk about protecting our creatures and ourselves. We've seen Airbender Ascension and how it lets us protect our creatures by airbending them. I mean, it's not an instant speed, but it still helps a little bit. Disorder in the Court is an instant speed, and it's a slow flicker that protects our creatures. Noble Heritage is a background enchantment. It's a legendary enchantment background for 1 and a white that says commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control. So this is Katara the Fearless has this ability. Whenever she enters and at the beginning of our upkeep, each player, including us, can put 2 counters on one of our creatures. This is an ability that Katara has, which means Katara is an ally, and our allies' abilities double, so this is going to trigger twice when Katara enters, as long as Noble Heritage is already in play, and at the start of our upkeep, it'll trigger twice. So everyone gets to put 2 counters on a creature twice. And for each opponent who does that, we gain protection from that player until next turn, meaning they can't target us with anything, they can't do damage to us with anything they control, and they can't enchant us with anything they control. Technically, they also can't attach things to us in other ways, with like a fortification or Bloodthirsty Blade attaching to us. Yeah, we're protected from targeting, damage, and attachment. So yeah, Noble Heritage is great in our deck because it protects us from that player if they take our counters, and if they don't, we're still getting the counters, and because it gives our commander this ability, so it will trigger twice with Katara. That's fun. Speaking of protecting Katara, we've got Swiftfoot Boots. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. We don't have to put this on Katara, but she's very powerful and she makes our deck much more powerful, so it's a good thing to put on her. But we can always move it around at sorcery speed for just 1 generic mana. We've seen the Mariner. The Mariner, it's not exactly this, but gives us and all of our permanents essentially Ward 1. So with Katara in play, Ward 1 twice. Pretty good. Angswift Savior lets us protect ourselves or one of our creatures by either airbending that creature or airbending a spell targeting us or them. Touch the Spirit Realm lets us do a similar thing with its slow flicker channel ability. Avatar's Wrath gives us protection because it makes it so our opponent's stuff is all airbent and they can't cast it again until our next turn. Hakoda protects all of our creatures by giving them +0/+5 and indestructible until end of turn. If we want to sacrifice them, of course. Sad dad. Lazel's Acrobatics, we talked about how that can protect our creatures. Hero of Gomafada gives itself and our other creatures indestructible when it or other allies enter. And Appa Loyal Sky Bison, again, lets us airbend something. So we can get rid of something that is maybe a blocker or something that's causing us problems, much the way that Airbender Ascension and Aang let us do. Even though Aang is the only one that lets us do it at instant speed, Airbender Ascension and Appa let us do it to get rid of a blocker, or get rid of a doubling season, or a Beastmaster Ascension, something that's dangerous for us, that's causing us problems. So that covers our rebuy section, or rather our protection section. Let's talk about our pump spells, the things that make our creatures bigger and therefore better able to do damage on the whole. Conjurer's Mantle gives +1/+1 and vigilance to the equipped creature. Earth King's Lieutenant puts a counter on all of our other allies when it enters, and a counter on itself when our allies enter, once it's already in play. And of course, those are doubled by Katara. Noble Heritage, also doubled by Katara, lets us put 2 counters on one of our creatures at the start of our upkeep and when Katara enters. United Front puts a counter on all of our creatures. Aang, on his backside, whenever it attacks, puts a counter on all of our tapped creatures. Kyoshi Warrior, as long as we have 8 or more lands, when it attacks, it gives all of our creatures +2/+2, or +4/+4 if Katara's in play. Retreat to Emeria lets us have a landfall trigger that gives +1/+1 to all of our creatures. Katara can overwrite our creature's power and toughness if we just waterbend X with her. Tajuru Warcaller, much like the Exemplars, whenever we have a rally trigger, our allies enter or it enters, +2/+2 to all those creatures. Vanquisher's Banner gives +1/+1 to all of our creatures that are allies, and Appa gives all of our creatures +1/+1, flying, and vigilance when we get a rally trigger from him. He enters or our ally or another ally enters. So lots of ways to pump up our team. let's talk about giving them evasion, because that helps too. Disorder in the Court gives evasion in the form of letting us exile a bunch of creatures that our opponents control. So that's a slow thing for us to do, but it only has to happen once, is what I'm trying to say. If we really need to push damage and our opponent's down to like 25, but we have 25 power on the battlefield, we just Disorder in the Court to get rid of all their blockers. That's pretty good. Herd Heirloom can give a creature with power 4 or greater trample until end of turn, plus a curiosity effect. Seascape Aerialist gives all of our allies flying whenever it or another ally enters. Appa can give one of our target creatures flying when Appa enters or attacks. Or this other Appa gives all of our creatures flying plus vigilance and +1/+1 when this Appa or another ally enters. That is our evasion section. One more section before we move on to lands is our tokens section. So Haru doesn't actually make tokens for us, but I often use the token section to represent earthbending, since it turns our lands into creatures that are temporarily creatures that we can use. So not actually tokens, but being able to earthbend periodically, or even if it's on the same land or on multiple different lands, gives us sort of temporary creatures, if you want to think of it that way. So that's Haru. Invasion Reinforcements comes in, makes an ally with it. United Front makes X allies. Retreat to Emeria makes an ally every time we have landfall, if we choose that mode. The Earth King makes a bear, 4/4 bear, pretty nice. Katara, Water Tribe's Hope, makes us an ally when it enters. Turn Timber Ranger, whenever it has its rally trigger, gives us a wolf. And Engi Katara makes us multiple allies based on the number of tapped artifacts and or creatures we control whenever it enters or attacks. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our lands now. We're running 18 basics, and these are the proportions of our deck. It's not following exactly our proportions, but it's close enough because we have a 3-mana commander in 3 colors. So we want to be able to ensure that we have a white, a blue, and a green source when she comes in, whether those are basic or not. So 18 basic lands is not terrible for this deck, and running 4 islands, 6 forests, 8 plains ends up being what we need. And we also need our basics because we have a lot of ways to find them, like the Earth King. So yeah, we're running 2 bicycle lands. We only have 2 in our colors, so we're running them both. Irrigated Farmland and Scattered Groves are lands that are basic typed. This is a plains and an island that comes in tapped. So if we needed to find a plains using Farseek, or an island finding Farseek, we could find Irrigated Farmland. It would enter tapped because Farseek brings it in tapped, but also it says it does. And then we would be able to untap with it, and we have a dual land. That's pretty good. We can also cycle it for 2. So if it's late in the game and we don't need another land, while this is in our hand, we can pay 2 generic mana and discard it just to draw a card. Pretty good. The same is true for Scattered Groves, except that it is a forest plains and makes green and white, rather than a plains island, which makes white or blue rather. So those are our bicycle lands. We have 4 fixing lands. Obviously, we're running Command Tower. It's an untapped land that makes 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. It's like Arcane Signet in that way. So an untapped tri-land, yeah, we want to run this. We also have Exotic Orchard, which is like Felwar Stone. It comes in untapped and makes 1 mana of any color in a land that a land an opponent controls could produce. So again, this might make red or black and nothing that we use. But it's more likely that we're going to be able to make at least 1 color of mana that we have, perhaps all 3, on a land that comes in untapped. Pretty good and worth running. Path of Ancestry is sort of like a tapped command tower. Comes in tapped and makes 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. However, when we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry 1. So every creature in our deck, other than Titan of Lityara, and the orc guy, Ironwill Forger, I believe. Yeah, I think every other creature in our deck shares a creature type with our commander, including our commander. Because obviously, she shares creature types with herself. So Path of Ancestry is going to give us an awful lot of scrying in our deck, and even if not, it's a tapped tri-land, and that's pretty good. Finally, in this section, we have Crozan Verge. This is a land that comes in tapped and taps for colorless. But we can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for a forest and a plains, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is very slow ramp, because this is us making 1 land drop and eventually getting 2 cards into play, 2 lands into play. Even though those come in tapped, this comes in tapped, and we have to pay to even make this happen. It's slow, but we're able to go find a forest and a plains. Remember, Scattered Groves is a forest and a plains. Irrigated Farmland is a plains and an island. So if we don't have either of these in play or in our hand, we could crack Crows and Verge and find both of these. They're going to come in tapped anyway, since they say they do, and Crows and Verge also says they come in tapped. But that means we've spent a couple turns to get 2 dual lands into play. That's pretty worth it. We're running all 3 Pain lands in our colors. We'll look at Adakar Wastes to describe them. So this is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or it can tap for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. That's fine. We have a couple of ways of gaining life in this deck, but really the way these normally play out is we'll just tap it for colorless. And if we really need the colored mana, it's worth 1 damage to fix our mana that one time. Even if this land or these other Pain lands do damage to us, 5 or 6 times over the course of a game, it's very unlikely that that's what's going to kill us in the end. And being able to make sure we have our colors is worth having this untapped dual land that just mostly doesn't hurt us because we're mostly using it for colorless mana. So Adakar Wastes, of course, makes white or blue, Brushland makes green or white, and Yavimaya Coast makes green or blue. We're running 3 Scry lands as well. These are the temples, Temple of Enlightenment, Mystery, and Plenty. These all come in tapped, and when they do, we scry 1, but they also tap for 1 or another color. So the temples are pretty great. They give us a guaranteed scry as opposed to Path of Ancestry, which gives us a scry based on us using its mana for a creature. This is going to give us more scries over time for sure, but getting a guaranteed scry off of our land drop is pretty nice. It is worth mentioning as well that we have ways to upgrade these lands. So these temples can be upgraded to the Surveil lands. So rather than coming in tapped and scrying, they come in tapped and Surveil, which gives us a little bit more flexibility with what we do with our cards, and they are also typed. So Lush Portico is the answer to Temple of Plenty, because it is also a forest and a plains, so we'd be able to find that with Farseek, or Nature's Lore, or Crows and Verge. So if you wanted to upgrade to more expensive lands, but also more utilizable, then the Surveil lands would be great here. The same is true for something like, these Pain lands. We could upgrade them into slow lands, I suppose. Slow lands that require us to have 2 other lands in play in order for them to come in untapped. Or maybe side grade them into pathways, which are modal. Rather than having a land that taps for green or blue, it's green on one side or blue on the other, and we have to choose when we play it, but it doesn't do any damage to us. Still possible. These bicycle lands, of course, we could change these out for more of a traditional dual, like a shock land. So we just pay 2 mana for it to come in untapped, and it just taps for our colors. We also have 2 Tango lands in the same colors as our bicycle lands. Tango lands are like the old version of slow lands. They come in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So we have to have 2 basic lands, not just 2 lands with basic land types in play, for the Canopy Vista to come in untapped. But even if it comes in as a tap land, that's okay, because it's a forest and a plains. It's got those types. We can use Nature's Lore or Farseek to find this. We can find it with Crows and Verge. If we find it with if we find it with Nature's Lore, then we have found a forest, and when it comes into play, Nature's Lore says put it in the battlefield. It doesn't say tapped. If when we do that, it happens to, or we already happen to control 2 basic lands, then the Canopy Vista will come in untapped, and we've just used our Nature's Lore to find ourselves a plains, and maybe we need the white mana for it. Pretty nice. Can't really do that with Prairie Stream since it's white and blue producing. It's a plains and island, but still nice and could come in untapped if we just play it, assuming we have 2 or more basics when we do. And we've got a Seaside Citadel, which is just a tapped tri-land. Makes all our colors, doesn't have any types, comes in tapped. It's not as good for us as Path of Ancestry, but it's fine. Gives us all of our colors. Finally, we're running these 5 utility lands. we're going to start by talking about Ally Encampment, a little bit of an older card from Battle for Zendikar. Comes in untapped and taps for colorless. We can also tap it to add 1 mana of any color as long as we use that on an ally spell. So pretty good. We get lots of cards in this deck that are allies. I think 30 cards, probably. Sounds right. 27 allies and then the 3 cards with Changeling. Yeah, so 30% of our deck is that. One of those is in our command zone. Pretty good. Or we can pay 1, tap, and sack the ally encampment to return an ally we control to its owner's hand. So we can use this to bounce one of our allies, protecting it from a harmful spell, or a control spell, or an exile effect, whatever it may be, and then replaying it, so we can just use this to rebuy if we've got plenty of land, and we don't need the ally encampment anymore. So yeah, good utility from this card. I like running Demolition Field in my decks, because you should always have one answer to a problematic non-basic land that an opponent controls. I don't typically, in the power level of my decks, run land destruction in general, but having one answer, that's fine. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic an opponent controls. They then get to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped, and so do we. So neither player is down a land. We both just have basics in play, assuming both of us had basics left in our library, but whatever problematic non-basic that they may have been running is out of our hair. And I know some people think of this as like, well, we want to have more sources of this to deal with more problems. I think that generally, at least in the power level of the pods that I'm building these decks for, people are running one problematic land, so the likelihood of them finding it is the same likelihood as us having this Demolition Field. It's 1 in 100, so it's not worth it. Sometimes we're going to get this and not have a great use for it. Sometimes they're going to get that, and they're not going to be able to get value out of it. That's fine. Next is the Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless. We can also tap it for 1 mana of any color, but only to cast an ally spell or activate an ability of an ally source, which for most of the cards in this deck, we don't really need colored mana to do that, but it's fine if we need it. Or we can pay 5 and tap it to make an ally. So this is one more source of ally tokens. We don't usually need to spend our mana on that when we've got so many cards that are better. But if there's a time when we have a lot of mana we want to spend, like maybe that White Lotus tile has made us a whole bunch of mana that we don't need for any other purpose, we can pump it into the tea shop and make another ally token. Or at least fix our mana for our many ally spells. Secret Tunnel is next. This is a cave land. It comes in untapped, and it can't be blocked, which may be relevant if Haru earthbends it, makes it into a creature. Or we can tap it for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it, and 2 target creatures we control that share a creature type can't be blocked this turn. So 2 of our allies become unblockable. A lot of the times, those can be pretty big, and that's enough for us. Finally, we have an Urban Retreat from the Spider-Man set. This is another tapped tri-land, but it also lets us pay 2 and return a tapped creature we control to its owner's hand in order to put this from our hand onto the battlefield, only as a sorcery. So we can maybe make our land drop for the turn. Then, if we have a way to contrive tapping one of our creatures, whether it's an attack or waterbending or whatever it may be, maybe tapping it for mana using Great Divide Guide, we spend 2 more mana and bounce one of our creatures that's tapped, and we get to play a second land. It's just Urban Retreat, only at sorcery speed, and it's going to come in tapped, of course. But that doesn't just give us the ability to accelerate our mana a little bit, possibly, but also it lets us rebuy that tapped creature, so hopefully we get a lot of power out of that. Now, we're not going to be able to use this to protect things very easily, since this is only at sorcery speed, and it's a pretty specific case, but we can definitely find a couple of uses for this in our deck. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Avatar Commander decks every Thursday through mid-January when Lorwyn Eclipsed drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific Avatar Commander or deck style. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, ring that bell if you want to get notified when I post videos. And remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.